And I'm delighted to introduce our two panel members. We've got Pepper Miller from the United States, author of Let Me Explain Black Again and several other books too, and Andrea Rademeyer, founder of Ask Africa. And we're going to be looking at some of the impacts of AI on different communities. So we're going to stop sharing the screen and turn on our cameras. Hi, Pepper. Hi, Andrea.
Ray, hi, good morning. Good morning, Andrea.
Good morning. Hello. Hi there.
So our first topic is going to be introduced by Pepper, and we're going to be thinking about the implication for AI in North America in particular, but also globally, in terms of the Black consumer, the Black researcher, and associated issues. I know this is a topic very dear to your heart, Pepper.
Yeah, yes, it is. Everything Black. Thank you so much for having me. So AI has become, very important. It is here. We are using it. Many of us don't understand, but there are some challenges with AI that the research community and the community at large needs to understand. First of all, the tech industry, when we think about the tech industry, there's a lack of representation of Black thought, Black insights, and Black images with AI still in 2024 America. It's better, but there's still problems. I just learned, for example, the apparatus that measures our oxygen levels when we are in surgery, they put this thing on our finger, and I'm so sorry, I don't know the name of it, but we learned that, for example, it does not necessarily read correctly people with darker skin. We've all heard the stories about facial recognition software, how darker skinned people aren't necessarily recognized. I think that's getting better, but there's still some problems with that as well. And then I talked about, and then there's speech patterns. Black people use a lot of slang. One example, doing a focus group, for example, when we were using AI, one of the respondents, and the client was listening to it, he was talking about his friends, and he called them dog, D-A-W-G. Oh, that's my dog, and my dog this, and my dog that. And they weren't understanding. They thought they were talking about the animal when the AI transcripts came through. So we had to talk about that and explain that to them. So that's still a problem. But there's a new dictionary coming out, the African American Oxford Dictionary, that's being developed by Skip Gates, Henry Louis Gates, that does all the research for the heritage research. That's coming out in 2025. And I hope that will be included in when and where we search and how we search for AI. The other thing that I talked about too at the conference that you and I were presenting, Ray, was the algorithm. Now, because I was delighted to see, for example, the word woke. A lot of controversy about the word woke, but it is today, as it is in 1920 and 1930. It was developed by Black people, and Black people developed this term to use our voices to talk about the injustices against Black people and to talk about the need for more equality. So if I put that in my ChatGPT, I'm going to get that correct definition because of the work that I do with Black consumers. But if a particular politician puts that in his ChatGPT, maybe, I don't know, in Florida, I'm wondering if they're going to get the incorrect information about what woke is, which is what's out there. So there's this need for correcting misinformation. And then it's about keeping people safe too. With all of the misinformation out there, gay people and trans people are being attacked, and particularly Black and brown people. Everybody gets attacked, but particularly Black and brown people are losing their lives at a higher rate because of it. There's some diseases that we have that people don't understand, like sickle cell, for example. It's a deformity of the red blood cells. Normal red blood cell is round. The sickle cell is moon-shaped. And so the sickle cell people have a lot of pain with this. It's like needles going through their veins. It's extremely painful. When they go in for treatment, many doctors and medical people believe, oh, these people are drug addicts. Now, white people, Black people, Hispanic people, many of them do get drugs sometimes and resell them, those who are addicts. It's a small number. It's a small number. But that becomes the umbrella description of Black people when they're going in for sickle cell. So there's a lot of misinformation out there physically, and particularly out there on the internet about sickle cell. So, just the lack of representation of images, this bad hair, my hair texture is still described as bad hair, or it's not as described as good hair as much as maybe Andrea's hair or your hair. There are more images of natural hair out there, but we still have work to do. I mean, I could go on and on and on about, some of the issues about, facial recognition algorithm, needing to keep people safe. We need to educate people. We need to involve all communities and getting their points of view, particularly if we're doing research, if we're making changes. We need to ask these communities that it's going to impact.
Absolutely. And I was just smiling at one point. I just wish I had hair.
Oh, you can have, everybody can have hair, trust me.
So one of the issues I'm seeing cropping up is around stereotypes. So if you put in one type of face and you say, what job do you think this person does? And if you put in a black face, they might say sportsman. And you put in a white face and they might say doctor. And that is going to have a problem. We see a lot of work with personas in terms of using AI. And if it's not done right, they will reinforce popular tropes. And where did they do their learning from? So I can see that as coming through as an issue. The thing that underpins a lot of AI are these things called guardrails, people who put in sensible rules. One of the problems is that the vast majority of people who program AI, white males and men from India, that's predominantly categories. We don't have many older people, younger people, African Americans, women in there. And without any intention, they can put in some really quite awful things into those assumptions. But if we turn it round, what could it do that would be really good? So I saw a really nice presentation recently, and using avatars to interview women in Indonesia about skincare. And they were using avatars that were Indonesian women wearing hijab. So we could actually have culturally sensitive interviewers. We could get the language adjusted so that it had the right sort of uses. All of that could be really positive. But will it happen is my question around that.
When you said you did the research for that, and I remember one of your presentations, you talked about that, which was fascinating and wonderful. So it's happening. It's happening. And that is part of the education. The research industry is 70% white and still 5% Black, for example. So, we've got to fix that. And the advertising industry is about that as well. So, your point about being more inclusive and having more people of color at the table is absolutely critical to AI, and at least challenging what comes from the current AI deliverables. We have to, people have to be able to challenge that. And the other people who might be feeling challenged, it's not punitive per se, but it's about getting it right. So I guess coming to the table with an inclusive mindset would help spread the idea. I love that idea of using the avatars to interview people. It's just going to have to be, more critical, and it has to be more top of mind. We're getting there in research. These conversations help a lot, Ray, and I appreciate you, and Andrea mentioned it earlier about having the diversity at the table. That's just absolutely critical. Small steps, which makes big results.
Excellent. And what about consumer patterns? So obviously I'm going to check this. The biggest consumer patterns in the United States are probably similar through most of the ethnic groups. They're going to be relatively consistent, but there are also important differences within that process. And what could AI be doing to help with the creation of appropriate products. I mentioned to you my daughter, when we were talking, has a lingerie business, and she's mixed race and therefore rolls her eyes every time she sees lingerie described as skin colored when it comes out as kind of pinky orangey. And what can we be doing, I wonder, in terms of consumer research to get products which are better fitted for communities? I forget what it is, the name of the product you put on your skin when you cut your skin in America. It's a different name to the UK. We talk about elastoplast or something like this, making those tones, but also hair products, clothing products, all of these sorts of things. What could we be doing, do you think, more with AI?
I think first, outside of AI, we have to be able to have these conversations and talk about differences. Different does not mean deficient. We are taught to look for similarities. And with Black people in the United States, because we speak English, there's a tendency to roll us in with mainstream. Black people are different, but not deficient. Brown people are different, but not deficient. So understanding the differences and talking about differences and making sure that those differences are positive, those are some of the things we have to bring to the table. We have to have these conversations outside of AI to get to how to fix AI actually, or how to, make it more broader and inclusive. And the more conversations we have, and even include some of those conversations in some of our AI chats, will really, really help the people become better, better educated about us. But talking about differences and including that is absolutely key. Language is not the cultural identifier. Culture is the cultural identifier.
Absolutely. Now, quite often when people are sort of critical of current thinking, they describe it as weird, which is white, educated, the I can't remember, rich, and democratic. And so it fits white North America, it fits Europe really well, and Australia, and less so. Now, if we jump to Andrea and Africa, Africa is not weird, white, educated, rich, democratic. So, Andrea, how is AI sort of being seen and arising in Africa? I know that's kind of a stupid question because Africa is not a place, but do the best.
Exactly. So Africa is not a country. There are 54 countries here. And as an African listening to this conversation, given how we've actually changed over the last few decades, I keep wanting to say, that's your world, it's not my world. Because a lot of work and learning has been done, and I can talk specifically for South Africa with a lot more examples about hair, about skincare, about skin color, where I think we are incredibly sensitive to each other. And in celebrating difference, not judging difference, and actually wanting to understand about difference, and being honorable towards both sides of the table, because white, you mentioned rich Democrat, would most certainly be tiny minority in Africa. So in Africa, we don't have that. We see it as very different. The thing about Africa is, on the one hand, we have this incredible generosity of spirit and sensitivity, I think, towards race, towards gender, towards wealth, towards ideas. And yet there is less money available to train. So through the marvelous Finn Rabin, who I still think is such a connector, much like you, Ray, I was introduced to a few AI companies, and we piloted these products in Africa, and I'm afraid it didn't work. So the first hurdle is price, where the price per interview in an African environment is at least 10 times more than we would pay locally. But we said we want to do it. Let's pilot this. But to give you an idea, to pilot, and I'm talking data collection at the moment. I'm not yet on analytics and other spheres of it. So I'm talking data collection. Listen to this. A 10-question interview with 2 open ends took an hour to complete, not because of the respondent, but because of the technology not being able to listen. The respondents, Pepper gave excellent examples of dog, my bra, the different English used, and I'm only talking South Africa yet. We only piloted here, and we have 11 official languages, and bad English is probably the official language used in this country. And the software couldn't cope, the tool couldn't cope. So we had to abandon it, unfortunately. What's needed is an investor that says, we'll train this tool, we'll train it. And the same, Pepper alluded to this, is needed for all tools we have, because they're fantastic tools. And I really want to have these tools in Africa, but I can't afford to train them either. So we need to come to the party from both sides, because what Pepper was saying is so true. If we don't invest for AI to train on bad English, to use that example, we are very dangerously skewing the insides of the world towards a very small bubble. And as a knowledge industry, we simply can't afford that. And then I'm not even talking to data sets yet. I'm not even talking to creating synthetic respondents. Now, there's unbelievable work being done globally, and I've seen particularly wonderful examples from Australia. But I must compliment Ipsos. I think they're doing amazing work in synthetic data, synthetic respondents. If these synthetic respondents look like, Ray, you earlier mentioned rich white Democrats, we have a huge problem. Just last week, as you might know, we are the TGI license holders in South Africa. We looked at the TGI data set, which is valid for 30 million South Africans, and we looked at personas that could be developed just looking at demographics. No psychographics, no media habits, just demographics. 320 personas for one country. Who's going to use that? So we need to balance the reality of the consumer, the reality of respondents, citizens in different countries, very heterogeneous countries, with the budgets, with the time a marketer has to work with these personas, and how differentiated will their marketing plan be, will their media plan be. So and that's why I come back to the biggest official language being bad English. Now it sounds like a joke, but what do we do with a lived reality like that? How do we develop tools? How do we make this artificial intelligence, which we're so excited about, how do we make it human enough to actually reflect reality in fringe continents and markets like Africa, like Latin America, who I think has 39 countries? Similar situation. What if you entered them only with Spanish or only with Portuguese? You lost. So it's an incredibly exciting time. I don't want to come across as only critical. I'm just saying the complexity in Africa is different. And it's a beautiful continent when you enter it with a liberal view of life and a willingness to learn and a willingness to reassess what you think you know.
So again, if we look at some of the good things, I saw a wonderful presentation. I think it was Hello Aria, working
Oh
with
yes,
Woolworths
yes.
in
Kriegler.
working with Woolworths in South Africa, where again they
Yes.
had a chatbot avatar talking to African women about their skin color, and it was talking forward. But I wonder if one of the challenges with all sorts of communities, including America, including in Africa, the person you're speaking to may speak this dialect, this lingua franca English, which is working between communities, but would they expect the interviewer to speak it, or would that sound like talking down?
And it very much depends on the product and the market. Now, remember, the Woolworths market is your top end.
Yes.
So it has some homogeneity in that sense. But if you look at banking, for example, or automotive, or I mean, there's so many other the industries where the socioeconomic differences are larger. And we often have particularly rural interviewers who expect, but it also depends on the sensitive nature of the study. They want to be spoken to in their own language. But so a lot of translations going on. We recently did a sickle cell study in, was it Uganda, I think? And we had to go to, again, it was such a difficult thing because we use the translators who are local because of all the accents. But the European client didn't want to accept that accent. They wanted a French, Parisian-based translation. So there are those kinds of difficulties which all come into play.
So I just want to understand, the client did not want the correct
Local,
representation
yes.
for the community?
The client didn't want a community-based translation. The client wanted a Oxford English type translation. So we sometimes have that a Swiss-based food company cannot accept that their products are used differently in Africa, that a soup might not be a soup in Africa, or things like that. And Pepper, you laugh, and I wish I could, because it's our job as researchers, of course, to educate and convince our clients that things are different in Africa, and that when you come to Africa, you should expect to be surprised, and you should be open enough to learn that communities are different. And if you want to be very Eurocentric or American-centric, you might be disappointed with what you find.
Not laughing, crying over here, but
Yeah.
thank you for your insight there.
I think that's opened up a lot of conversations which are great. We need to make sure that we continue having these international conversations, because that often brings a lot of additional insight. And so thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you so much, Pepper, for your time. And I look forward to talking to you both again soon.
Yeah, this was
Thank
great.
you, Ray.
Thank you, Andrea, for driving home the implications to the research community. I'm the insights girl, but I learned a lot here from you, and Ray too. Your questions were marvelous. This was wonderful. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. I loved it. Thank you, Ray. Salute.